Welcome back to Capitol View. I'm Roby Brock.
And I'm David Goins. Joining us now is senior writer for Politico.com, Jonathan Martin, joining us via satellite. Jonathan, good morning. Happy Mother's Day to you. Thank you for being on Capitol View.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We noticed that you actually have a Capitol View, too. We think that's very impressive right there over your shoulder.
Very fitting. Very fitting.
Let's talk about some things happening in Washington, D.C. Let's begin with some thoughts about the Manchin-Toomey bill, which apparently is on its way back to the U.S. Senate for some consideration. It needs some extra votes to clear that 60 threshold. Arkansas Senator Mark Pryor, obviously very pivotal in that potential vote. What are some of the significant changes that are being discussed about Manchin-Toomey, and how does Mark Pryor play a role in that?
There is some talk about changing the language so it's less onerous in terms of internet gun sales. But the challenge with doing that is if you water down the bill, then you run the risk of turning off some of the folks on the left who voted for the bill in the first place that was already a fairly watered down piece of legislation. So I don't think it's likely that you're going to see another gun control vote on the Senate floor this year, and probably next year for that matter too. Harry Reid was embarrassed by losing that vote. Of course, Harry Reid being the Senate Democratic leader, and the prospect of him bringing up another vote will probably only come if he knows he has 60. And it's unlikely that he's going to get to 60 because the Democrats like Mark Begich from Alaska and Senator Mark Pryor there from Arkansas, of course, who are up next year for re-election, are unlikely to change their votes. And if that isn't going to happen, then Reid's not going to bring it up. There's a lot of politics going on here. They've already forced some of these Democrats facing tough elections next year to take one vote. It's unlikely, unless they know the votes are suddenly there, they're going to make those guys walk the plank a second time.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we look at as we move into the summer. Obviously, immigration looks to be the main course for the Senate for the rest of the summer. So, from kind of your estimation, it doesn't really look like there's any palpable for another vote on something similar to Manchin-Toomey.
I would be very skeptical that happens this year because. Where do they find the 60 votes? I mean, unless there's a groundswell between the sort of semi-moderate Republican senators and the red state Democrats who voted against the piece of legislation in the first place, it's hard to see it happening. Again, keep in mind, this is against the backdrop of the 2014 campaign, and Harry Reid is not going to make his Democratic senators take another tough vote unless he knows he's got 60 there.
Let's talk about the 2014 elections. Obviously, Senator Mark Pryor up for re-election. This is going to be one of the biggest, hottest races in the U.S. Senate across the country. Kind of give our viewers a little bit of a sense of just how big Pryor's re-election campaign is playing inside the Beltway there in D.C.
It's a huge race because Democrats are looking to keep their majority recognized. The only way they keep their majority is if they retain those states where President Obama lost last year, but where they have Democratic senators up in 2014. That includes Arkansas, North Carolina, Louisiana, Alaska, Montana, South Dakota also too. Arkansas at the top of the list, guys, because it has become so conservative trending in the last couple of election cycles. But Democrats here know that Mark Pryor has got a sort of golden family name, has got a pretty impressive retail touch back there. And if any Democrat can still win statewide in Arkansas for the U.S. Senate, it's Mark Pryor. And if he can't win, then perhaps no Democrat can still win there for a Senate race statewide. Now, the Republicans say it doesn't matter who's on the ballot in Arkansas. The state has become so conservative and has moved so fast to the GOP in the last couple of election cycles that it's just become an easy Republican pickup. That the Blanche Lincoln model, of course, who lost there in 2010, proves that Democrats cannot win a federal race in Arkansas. So this is going to be a great test, I think, between sort of underlying demographic trends taking place in Arkansas versus a great political name in Arkansas and someone who knows the state very, very well and has worked hard to fashion a kind of sort of centrist image here in Washington and also back home.
Yeah, Jonathan, I was going to ask you that maybe is that the key difference between 2010 and 2014 when you look at, Lincoln and Pryor? You talk about Pryor's obviously statewide, the family name, but also,
right.
2010 you were down here when former President Clinton was stumping for Lincoln just so she could survive a primary. Obviously, Pryor's not going to have that, but do you see the dynamics being similar?
Helps. Yeah, I think it's similar in the sense that Arkansas has become a much more traditional Deep South Republican state in the last few years. I think Pryor has a few advantages, though obviously his experience running statewide and his last name. And I think he's probably a bit better of a retail politician than Senator Lincoln was, but he's facing the same demographic headwinds that she was. The big question, guys, that we don't know going into next year is, are the political dynamics of 2014 going to be the same as 2010? There was a huge backlash to President Obama and the Democratic Congress in 2010 that Senator Lincoln suffered from. It's too early to say what next year is going to look like, where the political winds are going to be blowing. Is there going to be that traditional 6-year itch where second-term presidents typically suffer losses in their second midterm? Or will President Obama still have some strong capital next year and not be popular in Arkansas, but not be a huge sort of toxic asset hanging around Senator Pryor's neck? We just don't know yet because we're still a year and a half out.
All right, Jonathan, about 60 seconds left here right now. Just a quick last question for you. Tom Cotton is the big name that everybody has mentioned, first-term congressman from South Arkansas.
Right.
Is he the perennial favorite in Washington, D.C.? What's the buzz about Tom Cotton?
He is by far the preferred candidate against Pryor among not just the establishment here in Washington, but among conservatives here in Washington. Also, there's this sort of ongoing tension between the conservative Tea Party wing of the party and the establishment wing of the party. He's one of those rare candidates or would-be candidates who unites both factions. And I think there's going to be intense pressure on him to run. There's going to be promises of a lot of money from groups like the Club for Growth, but also from more traditional Republican entities. And so if it's not him, I don't know who they go to. But there's no question in Washington he is absolutely the preferred pick. For a freshman House member, he's gotten a lot of exposure so far here in the sort of national media. And I think because of that and because of the relationships he already has in the Capitol, there will be a big lobbying effort here in the months ahead to get Cotton to challenge Mark Pryor.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out during the summer. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and we really appreciate your contribution to Capitol View.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
When we come back, our roundup of the week in political news. I'm Roby Brock alongside David Goins, and you're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning on KARK.